So I already mentioned that there's sort of two ways to think about layering. You can look at it as an enhancement technique and also as a creation technique. So those are the two ways I like to think about it. Um, and the first is a process of course, enhancement, enhancing an existing sound or an existing layer. And the other is a process of cohesive creation. But what do I mean by that? Well, let's say for an example of enhancement, you have a really nice pluck sound. You're pretty happy with it, but you feel it needs a little bit more body. So you layer another pluck sound underneath it that contains that bodily characteristic. And in this sense, we'd be using layering as an enhancement. It's not necessary, but we're filling in the gaps and we're just making the original or initial sound a bit better. Now, on the contrary, you might want to create a new sound, a new original sound. So you take that really nice pluck that you had initially and you layer a pad with it, processing it until the two elements sound like they're one. And this is layering as a creation. We're going to be looking at this a bit more in terms of synths and leads when we get to that module. But it's important to note that there's a bit of crossover between these two applications of layering, and sometimes you may aim to enhance a sound and in the process create a completely new sound that differs largely to the original. Conversely, you may start layering with the intent of creating a completely new sound and instead simply enhance your initial sound. But layering is something you should aim to do intuitively. At least eventually. If you're new to layering, then you're going to have to think about it quite a lot. But eventually you want to get to that stage where you intuitively know what you're doing. And part of my aim with this course is to get you somewhat to that stage where you just know whether a sound needs enhanced or you're creating a new sound from two layers, and you don't have to think about it. It's just like that, snap of the fingers, and you know what to do. So basically what I'm saying is don't be too overwhelmed by these two different applications of layering. The only reason why I'm teaching it is just so you can sort of look at layering as a two technique process instead of just one elusive concept. So I'm going to take you through a few examples here. I've got two groups. One is called enhancement, one is called creation. I'm just going to show you or explain what I mean by enhancement and creation. So the first sound here is a clap layered with a noise sample. So if I play this, it's pretty straightforward. But in this case, I added white noise as an enhancement. I already had a clap, but I felt like it needed a bit more high end. So I layered silent 1, a bit of EQ, just a bit of noise to give it that sizzle at the top. So while it does create a new sound, it's more of an enhancement. The only reason I added that white noise was to add a bit more punch or a bit more high end. Now, if we compare this to somewhat of a counterpart to it in the creation group, the snare and clap, the two layers here sort of contribute to a larger original sound or a cohesive sound. So I'll play this for you. So I've got a snare, a clap, and neither layer is sort of enhancing one another. There's not really a initial or original or fundamental sound. The two sounds contribute to a larger whole. So that's an example of creation when it comes to percussion or claps. The next example I've got here is a pluck and supersaw. So I'm just going to play this for you. So basically I started off with just a supersaw layer as the main element. And while it sounded really nice, I felt like it needed a bit more bite, a bit more transient. So what I did is I layered a short pluck with it just to enhance it. So I'll play the short pluck for you by itself. And that's not the most desirable sound by itself, but when layered with the super saw, it really changes the whole sound and the whole. It adds a lot of punch, a lot of transient, which I really like. And again, this is an enhancement. It's not completely necessary. It's an artistic decision that I think works. So if I compare this to the super saw versus piano, you'll hear that the two largely differ in terms of how much importance each layer has. So in this case, the pluck is just an enhancement. It's not necessary. But in the case of the saw and piano, the two sounds sort of have equal weight. And if you take one out, it completely changes the sound. So you need both, and that's why it lies in the creation group. And finally, I've included a kick, which should really be outside this group because it's sort of a crossover between the two. So the low end of the kick here is played with a synthesizer, which is Big Kick. We've actually done a review of that, which I'll leave a link to. So I can play this kick, this low end by itself. And you know, it's still a kick. That low end there is still a kick, and you can hear this in genres like dark techno and sort of old school music where the top end of the kick was often left out. Now, I've also added in a top sample to this. So now when I play it, it sounds a lot more modern, a lot more punchy. So you could call this an enhancement, enhancing the original low end of the kick. But you could also call it a creation because it's sort of creating a completely new sound that's cohesive and differs largely from the original. So when it comes to things like this, it's sort of a matter of opinion. But I thought I'd include it anyway to make you think. So now that we've covered some of the philosophical side of layering, we're going to move on and tackle one of the most essential tools that you need to know how to use in order to layer effectively, and that is EQ.